The conference once assumed dead is now as close to the top of college athletics as any of us could have imagined. How did we get here? This is Locked On Big 12.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Big 12. I'm Drake Toll from ESPN Central Texas. Thank you for making Locked On Big 12 your first listen every single day. Let's tie it all together with a bow. This is what you need to know about Big 12 expansion right now. Look, thank you, first and foremost, for a great week this week and a lot of content that I put a lot of research into. This isn't some weird conspiracy theory. Hell, CBS's Tom Fornelli said the biggest impact of this year's college football playoff process will have is it's the death knell of the ACC. We lost the Pac-12 this year, and Fornelli says he's been saying for months the ACC is a dead conference walking, and the college football playoff finished it off. Look, I mean, not to say that I don't do good work, but I'm no Tom Fornelli, and some of the biggest names in college athletics are painting the picture of Florida State's exit of the ACC. Now we're talking about the Big 12, the same conference that 3-4 years ago was going to implode entirely when Texas and Oklahoma left. The talking heads were saying, RIP Big 12, it's over for them. It's Kliavkov coming out, this is even a year ago, saying that he's going to go shopping in the Big 12. Still didn't feel that after Bob Bowles, he made his final act of adding BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF, that the Big 12 was strong enough to stay together, that he thought the Pac-12 could poach teams. And then Brett Yormark says, hold my beer, and adds Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado, and cements the Big 12 as not just a team that is staying alive, a conference that is staying alive, but instead one of the power conferences in college football that is so powerful. We're having a legitimate talk right now about the ACC's implosion and where the Big 12 can go to poach those teams. In short, and if you've been listening to the shows this week, you picked up. If you're an everydayer, if you've been at the water cooler bringing this information to your work, you picked up on the fact that Florida State is very unhappy with the ACC and has been unhappy for 6 months. There have been conversations of them trying to breach the grant of rights or at least find a way that they don't have to pay $500 million to leave that conference. And Clemson's kind of right there with them. And UNC's doing the same thing. And NC State actually changed its vote to get SMU, Cal, and Stanford in that conference. Now, the reason those three teams were added is because the ACC needs to keep 15 teams, Notre Dame included, to be able to harbor their current TV contract. They added those three schools so that if Clemson and UNC and Florida State leave, the TV contract stays the same. Well, now if Florida State leaves, Clemson's obviously right behind them. There are talks of the Big Ten being interested in those schools. There are talks of the Big Ten being interested in Virginia and Virginia Tech. In that case, the TV deal falls apart, and I can tell you right now that, this is obvious. Cal, Stanford, SMU, the same SMU that's paying its way to be in the ACC, are not strong enough to hold that conference together. And when the TV networks decide to rework that deal with the ACC, or when it is breached, when that number 15 is breached, all hell breaks loose. And the Big 12 is in a good enough spot that when the SEC says, yeah, we don't want NC State. When the SEC says, we don't want Pitt. When the Big Ten says, we don't want Pitt. And the Big Ten says, we could justify Clemson and Florida State, but I don't know about Miami. And the SEC says, well, we don't want Miami. Well, where do those teams end up? The Big 12. And it's so odd that we're having this conversation because the power teams, the top of the ACC is better than the top of the Big 12. The Big 12 doesn't boast a school or a brand like Florida State. But that brand being as big as it is diminished by being in the ACC. Thus, they were left out of the college football playoff, and that's why they want to break away from that conference. The Big 12 didn't really have to do anything. And the demise of the Pac-12, right? This is after Texas and Oklahoma decided to leave. The Big 12 had to play the offensive to stay alive. They had to go find teams from the AAC and then BYU. Then it was, okay, we're safe for now. Can we try to hold on and weather the storm? Here's where the dream scenario comes out for this conference. The Pac-12 falls apart on its own. USC and UCLA leave. There's still a way to keep all those teams together. There's a fine core there. It's the equivalent of Texas and Oklahoma leaving. But instead, George Kliavkov shoots his whole conference in the foot. It falls apart. And Brett Yormark was part of that. In the middle of them trying to stay together, Yormark went in and stole 4 of the biggest teams left over in the Pac-12. Unapologetically. Though he did say last week that he was sorry the Pac-12 fell apart. He had a little bit to do with that there, Brett. Now, in similar fashion, it's not like Brett Yormark needs to go in with a wrecking ball and start tearing down the ACC. He didn't do that with the Pac-12. The catalyst to that was poor leadership. And the catalyst to the ACC being in the middle of an implosion is at its root poor leadership. The SEC is ruled by ESPN. That's why the college football playoff is the way that it is. That's why Alabama's in, because the SEC has so much stock right now. Because the SEC makes ESPN money, and ESPN would have lost over $100 million if an SEC team got in. If it was the right 4 teams, if it was the deserving 4 teams, they told you it's not going to be the deserving teams. So now with that, when Florida State decides to go, Clemson's not going to sit around and wait. Miami's not going to sit around and wait. NC State even is not going to sit around and wait. Buch Oregon's too good. And they already voted no to adding those 3 teams, had to change their mind for 3 new teams to get into that conference. There is such unrest in that league. And guess what? Can you name me one piece of unrest in the Big 12 right now? The only unrest we're having is in Manhattan, Kansas about the damn basketball program. Now that's bad for one little pocket. But as a whole, this conference, if that's the most of your issues, is doing just fine. Flying colors. Cultural fits with the new teams being added. A blue-collar fit with the new teams being added. That's a dream scenario. Florida State eyeing a leave from the ACC and the Big Ten, rumors saying being interested in it. That's a dream scenario. To the point where a former president who left 2 years ago is saying, yes, we need to make this move now. The big talking heads at ESPN and CBS are saying, yes, this move needs to be made now. And you read the 24/7 articles saying that Florida State's going to leave the ACC. That's not just, they don't just write that stuff for fun. They don't just write that stuff without any sourcing. That's a dream scenario for the Big 12. Because now, when that falls apart, and even if Commissioner Phillips comes to Brett Yormark and says, buddy, we got to make a pact, we will. But the Big 12 is the one with the upper hand here. The Big 12 is the one that gets to keep the brand here. It's the strongest conference easily in college athletics outside of the SEC and the Big Ten. And you can make a case that the Big 12 is in a better spot right now than a Big Ten that's trying to figure out a whole lot of stuff that seems pretty complex, including adding even more teams that are even more spread out. For the Big 12, if you add Pittsburgh, it's just a hop, skip, and a jump. If you add Louisville, great. We got teams close enough. I mean, there's a way that this is so clean. And it just falls in Brett Yormark's lap. I keep saying, that the Big 12, Bob Bowlesby and even Yormark there last summer had to play the offensive. I don't even know how much this would be the least amount of offense they've had to play ever to allow big name brand schools to fall in their lap. What does this do for us as fans? I don't know. I'm kind of torn by this. You probably should be too. I hope you are. Because it kills traditional college football. That the traditionalist in me doesn't love this. I don't revel in the fact the ACC is falling apart. And I also think this expedites the process. I'll talk about this more next week. It expedites the process of building just a couple of power conferences in college athletics. That this whole deal from Charlie Baker, the president, says that, for us, we feel like it'd be better to have the elite schools just right here, right now. Yeah, I think this expedites that process. Brett Yormark talked about consolidation. That's scary because there are teams in the current Big 12 that might get left behind. But I would rather be in this situation than be over in the ACC, hosting Locked On ACC. Rather be in this situation than in the Pac-12, Locked On Pac-12. I mean, that's just a dangerous spot to be in. I feel so comfortable with where the Big 12 is. So the traditionalist side of me doesn't love the fact we might see Boston College play Iowa State in a regular season matchup. That doesn't register too well. But I'd much rather be there than be sitting in my hands like Oregon State and Washington State. That sucks for those fans. And I hope when this is all worked out that the Big 12 can pick them up and it makes financial sense because those schools deserve it. Thank you for watching this week. Today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors. eBay Motors is where I go to keep my ride or die alive. Passion, drive, and patience. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle. My vehicle breaks down all the time. I am the king of my vehicle just cacking out. I take it in every other month. I've stopped doing that because I get superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And eBay guaranteed fit. Your parts guaranteed to fit. You're burning rubber, not cash. ebaymotors.com. Keep your ride or die alive. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit. Only available in the United States. Once again, sincerely, thank you for a great week of content. I spend a lot of time making sure that I'm as informed and updated as possible and can bring you short, digestible clips, passionate, digestible clips about what is going on and what the future of the Big 12 looks like. I want there to be no one else in this world outside of those front offices in Irving, Texas, that knows more about this league than me. That's my goal, and that's how much I want to study this stuff and bring you that kind of information. I know a lot of it seems poppy, a lot of it seems big, a lot of it seems big picture, but it is. And I'd rather start there than go into the weeds, the details of, oh, well, this has to happen for this to happen. No, let's just talk about the obvious. The everyday obvious stuff that's going on right now that points to a really healthy Big 12 in the future. This has been, it always will be. Thanks for hanging out with me. And thanks for making this your first listen every single day. Locked On. Thanks again for making it your first listen every single day. Doce Grande.